everybody. Welcome in to Load the Box. I'm still in my summer shirt, and Jack's in a t-shirt, and I did break out the Vikings hat for the first time in quite a while, it feels like. I've been going with this old Sperry Topsiders hat I got whenever I was like in high school, and like now it's all beaten up, so it kind of like is it's in a new life now. And but yeah, football furthest thing on mine, Jack's mind lately, but training camp starts next week for the Vikings. So tonight we've got a little show. We're going to go over a little bit of news. We're kind of just going to go with the flow, see what gets us to 20, 30 minutes worth of content, and it'll be entertaining as always. But before we get into anything, before we talk about any football, anything like that, Jack Day. We have talked, of course, but how has your break, we'll call it, been off the camera?
It's been good, and I think it's a little bit of a luxury for us because I mean the beat reporters that are doing this full time, they have to cover this team year round, and you and I can kind of just when in need, we can kind of put the team on the back burner and say, you know what, let's not devote all of our summer to this. And obviously, I think that helps with both of us because one, I know for a fact it's helped my golf game out. I've been playing a lot more than I probably should, but I'm thankful for that. But I think it builds up even more excitement as we approach next week and the players starting to report for training camp. So I think the shows, we're going to hit the ground running. We might be a little bit rusty to start, but I'm excited to kind of dive back into things and start getting football on the mind again.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying there. Really good for the golf game. I mean, my golf game's still terrible, but I'm actually going this Saturday, and me and my brother are playing 18. We've been going all over southwestern Ohio and playing, and it's been nice. It's been a nice summer, but the first what do you want to call it? The first sign of the end of summer is always that teams start reporting rookies to training camp, and then you start hearing stories about, Justin Jefferson made this catch over this corner, or, Patrick Peterson had an amazing interception. And slowly but surely, football wraps its leathery claws around you and pulls you right back in. So, we're dipping our toes in this week. I kind of figured we could just talk about some of the headlines that sort of popped up while we were gone, and maybe see if that's talk aboutable, if you will, kind of bounce it around. And one of the first ones, we have a comment, and it's Jeff Hawthorne said he loves the Vikings offseason. He wants to get J.C. Trotter and Ndamukong Suh and then go play some football. And I don't know how much I agree with the Ndamukong Suh, like, rumors. I think he would be valuable, but I have to call it out. I'm really excited for Jalen Twyman to be healthy this season, to see what he might be able to bring to the defense. I don't know how heavily they're going to rely on him moving into this 3-4 style, how, he does kind of seem like the smaller defensive tackle, so maybe he gets some first down looks before we go into like a nickel set, but I don't know. Jalen Twyman is a guy I think both of us were really high on coming out of Pitt, and then had the gunshot wounds, I think multiple last season, so he didn't end up playing, kind of got a red shirt year. He's a guy that if we did sign Suh, I understand it, and obviously Suh's going to play, but I'd be disappointed because it would mean another year J.C. Trotter, another year Jalen Twyman sits on the bench and doesn't really do much for the Vikings, and I'm really excited to see what he has to bring. What were your thoughts when you saw the Ndamukong Suh rumors, if you will?
The acquisition of the player, if that happened, the position, I'm okay with. I'm okay with adding more depth there, but I've never been a Suh fan. I think anyone that tells you they are a Suh fan and they're not a fan of the team that he's currently on is lying to you. I think he's one of those players where it's like, you've done some things, and I don't like throwing out the word like dirty player because I know some people make mistakes. I'm sure some people will say, hey, Harrison Smith is a dirty player because he takes your head off across the middle. I don't consider players like that, but when you're straight up stomping on players when they're on the grounds, I just don't love that. And I don't know, they're moving towards, and I don't know if that's necessarily been the case with Suh. I'm sure I don't think that was necessarily a huge issue when he was with the Buccaneers, but for a team preaching that they want this collaboration and this culture, it just doesn't it rubs me the wrong way that they'd bring in a guy that, in my opinion, has been looked at like that. And J.C. Treader, again, if they were to bring in Sue, I don't hate the actual acquisition of the position, but the player and some of the stuff that he's done throughout his career, it doesn't sit well with me completely. I'd be okay with it because it is a position of need/want. I wouldn't say it's a full-blown need because I think there are some good players. Armin Watts is another player that I've talked about recently in a friend group, just talking about, hey, who's going to slide into that role? I think Armin Watts has a chance to take that role. But going to the other guy, J.C. Treader, I'm all for that. Right before the show, I actually just saw a report come out that said the Vikings, I think it was like 8th or 9th. It's on my Twitter at Jack_H_Day. If you want to go get the exact number, it was somewhere in the 15 millions that this team still has left over for cap space. If you can get a legitimate offensive line going into training camp with the offensive pieces already in play, and I think it's fair to assume or at least hope that the defense is going to take a step forward as well with all the pieces they have on that side of the ball, it'd be very hard to go into training camp and not be completely jacked up about this team. I think I said this on one of our last episodes. I think fans need to pump the brakes a little bit with the Kevin O'Connell coming in and immediately hitting the ground running and this being a 14-15 win team. I don't know if that's the case, but if that offense does click right away and they hit the ground running from week one, this could be a legitimately terrifying team for other teams to play. I think the NFC North has kind of taken a step backwards. The Packers, by far, I think they're going to be a top 3, top 4 defense for sure, but I don't know what that offense is going to look like without Davante Adams. I think the Vikings could potentially at least give them a run for their money. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's the Vikings North to win. I still think it's the Packers division to lose. But the Vikings are never a winning superstar team when they're supposed to be. It's always when they're kind of in the weeds a little bit, and that's when they jump out. When they have Case Keenum at quarterback and he comes out of nowhere and wins a bunch of football games, I kind of get the vibe outside of the Colin Cowherd stuff, which has been absolutely crazy to me that he thinks this is a 13-14 win team. I hope he's right because that would be a lot of fun. But I think this team doesn't have a ton of high expectations. And the talent on this roster, I know it's a first-year head coach, but the talent that's already in place, I think it's good enough to make some sort of legitimate run at the playoffs. And the other bit of news that I'll throw back to you, because I think, were you done with the Sue and the J.C. Treader stuff?
Yeah, I think I said my piece with it. I'm also not a Sue guy. I didn't really go into that aspect of it, but I mean, yeah, man, he's like a fat Patrick Beverly, and I'm not a Pat Bev fan. I know that you are.
I was.
Pat Bev's not a Timberwolf anymore. So now you can look back at where was he at? The Clippers whenever he shoved Chris Paul in the back. Now I think you can look back and you can think rationally and be like, oh yeah, Pat Bev, he's not a good basketball player.
You would transition that perfectly, talking about a little bit of drama and beef between players on the court. How about we look in our own backyard and talk about all this stuff? I think this was already kind of assumed, but Ben Lieber recently came out and essentially said Mike Zimmer despised Kirk Cousins. And we've been looking at Kirk Cousins through this microscope for the last four or 5 years. I don't even remember what it is because, we haven't done a podcast in over 5 weeks, so give us a little bit of a breathing room, if you will. But the beef between those two, I think it was pretty clear, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because now there's things that flash back in my head, like Kirk Cousins grabbing Mike Zimmer on the sidelines and screaming at him. I don't think that was all necessarily fun and games now at this point after the reports coming out, and I think that is why the Wilfs are pushing for that collaboration piece when they hired Kwesi and they hired Kevin O'Connell. And I think maybe if the people that are saying, hey, this could be a 13-14 win team, maybe they do believe that Kirk Cousins is good enough with the roster that's currently here, and that it was just kind of a deranged relationship between a quarterback and head coach, and that's just something that doesn't mix well in today's NFL.
Yeah, I think that I do want to touch on the Colin Cowherd thing because I have a working theory. So it became a joke amongst Vikings fans that Colin Cowherd said the Vikings were going to go 16-1 because he said we were going to double our wins in 2022. I almost just said 2016, and I'm way off. I gotta get laser focused in. But he said they were going to double their wins, and Vikings fans said, "Ha ha, Colin Cowherd thinks the Vikings are going to win 16 games." And I think Colin Cowherd just looked at it and said, like, I'm allowed to be wrong every once in a while. F it. I think the Vikings are going to win 15, 14 games this season legitimately, and they're going to be the best team in the NFC. And I'm like, what? Like, with a first-year head coach? But going to the old days, old drama, it's crazy to me that this is picking up steam. It's always weird to me when the Vikings get talked about on any national media stage because it just feels like they never have been. It feels like since I've been like following the sports world, it is like it's the big market teams. It's the Cowboys. It's the Patriots. It's the Buccaneers. It's wherever Tom Brady is. Like they talk about those teams on repeat on a carousel. And even in 2017, I remember watching Good Morning Football, and they would usually only do like a 5-minute Vikings segment, and the Vikings were like the 1 seed at one point. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, the Vikings won. Big day from Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. Case Keenum, that's nuts. Next. And so I feel like they're getting a lot of attention. This isn't news, though. That's what I'm getting at here, and I'm taking the long road, too. Everyone knew that Mike Zimmer wasn't a fan of Kirk Cousins, and I know that it had been reported anonymously. No one put their name on it, blah, blah, blah. I remember seeing reports, or maybe they were just theories that I'm remembering as reports, but people were speculating that Mike Zimmer wanted to spend all the money on the defense and bring back, I think, Teddy Bridgewater after the Case Keenum season, and Rick Spielman and the Wilfs decided to say, you know what, you're the coach, you're going to coach, we make the personnel decisions. And they went out and they got Kirk Cousins, and Zimmer was pissed because it meant his defense was no longer as good because they lost some starters and they weren't as deep. So now all of a sudden one injury can derail the entire defense. And then you get, real football minds like Jordan Hawthorne and Jack Day saying, well, Mike Zimmer, you're a defensive coach, your defense sucks, you gotta go. And sure enough, your defense sucked, and so you had to go. I don't think this is like breaking news. I think it's because Ben Lebo is so close to the team and stamped his name on it. Like, it wasn't anonymous sources say, it wasn't no one danced around it. Ben Lebo just said, hey, Mike Zimmer hated Kirk Cousins, but he didn't watch film with him until last season. They were together for 3 years, and Mike Zimmer just decided to start watching film with him, which is really telling. With all the Tom Brady documentaries that you watch, you can almost always see him. There's always a scene of him and Belichick going into the film room together, and Belichick being like, well, from a defensive standpoint, this, and Brady being like, well, from my standpoint, these things, and they would kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And the fact that I don't even know how those meetings went, I doubt they were as collaborative. I'm sure they were just Mike Zimmer saying, don't throw interceptions and run the damn ball when I tell you to. I don't know that, I don't know that any of this should come off as shocking, but okay, let me phrase that a little differently then. So is there going to be a weight lifted off of Kirk Cousins' shoulders then? And if so, this is me kind of asking both of us this question because I don't honestly know, and it remains to be seen until we get into the season with this Kevin O'Connell run offense. But Kirk Cousins has been, I will argue, a pretty damn good quarterback over the last 4 seasons. I know he's had some ups and downs in a Vikings uniform, but the whole thing was trying to get Kirk Cousins to this next level, and that wasn't going to happen with a coach that despised him. And if a coach comes in and caters to his strengths, I got to believe, and not only caters to his strengths, but openly has human interaction with him, and they don't despise one another, I got to believe that's going to lift some weight off of Cousins' shoulders. And at the end of the day, I tend to believe that's going to make him a better quarterback as well. Yeah, I think it's telling that, I'm not a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy, but he works in that system. Whatever offense they're running, he knows how to execute it at a decently high enough level that they can get things done. Jimmy Garoppolo needs help. I think Kirk is better than Jimmy Garoppolo, I still, I'm not the biggest Kirk Cousins fan, but I agree with you. I think that you are going to see a lot of the things that you saw in LA with the Rams and Sean McVay's offense, and a lot of the things you saw in Cincinnati with the Bengals and Zach Taylor's offense. I think you're going to see that come to Minnesota. And I've watched a couple different film breakdowns on the offense and what it really goes into. And a lot of it is just the simplest stuff. Like the offense depends on you having one wide receiver that is willing to be physical in the run game. And other than that, it's all just like the easiest stuff. It's like put a tight end on the left side of the line, put a wide receiver on the right side, and then run behind the wide receiver because no one's expecting it. And so they stack the other side, and then you have a wide open lane. And as long as your wide receiver gets nasty, you're fine. And like it's a lot of just easy man coverage beating routes. It just seems like such an easy offense that I do think Kirk's going to excel in it. Excuse me. And I think that like how do you not this is me flipping the question back. How high are your expectations for Justin Jefferson? And I won't accept an answer that isn't like 1,700 yard minimum on his year. He should be considered the best wide receiver in the league this year, except for the fact that in my own head, Jamar Chase is going for 2,000 this year because I still think Jamar Chase is just that good. But like, what are your expectations for Justin Jefferson in this offense? Because I think we agree Kirk Cousins is going to be unleashed, unhinged in this thing.
And it's going to be a pass-happy offense, something we haven't seen in Minnesota in what seems like our lifetime. It's always seemed like it's more of a run-focused team, and I think it has to be sky high across the board for expectations. If we're taking injuries out of it, I mean, I have high expectations for not only Justin Jefferson, but I have high expectations for the legitimate breakout season. I know we've been saying it for years, and I think we would have been having this conversation at the end of last year if it wasn't for injuries. But an Irv Smith Jr. breakout is coming if this offense clicks. I think we're going to see a resurgence with Adam Thielen. Again, I know he's battled with some injuries over the last couple seasons, but when Adam Thielen's been healthy, he's been a very good go-to red zone target. I think he can still demand the football quite a bit and get a lot of catches and go for over. In my opinion, this offense is going to have at least two receivers over 1,000 yards. With Justin Jefferson, I think 17 is a little bit aggressive, but I think I would say I'd put it around like 1,550, 1,600 yards.
It has to be.
It's super, and I think Thielen is the one where I think Adam Thielen could go for over 1,000 yards if he stays healthy. I know that's a big if, but it doesn't stop there. I have high expectations for KJ Osborne as the wide receiver 3. I think we're going to see him utilized a lot more. And I can kind of use that question to transition into kind of just talking about some of the things that we're excited for. We'll probably do more of a legit position breakdown next week as players are starting to show up for training camp. But that wide receiver position, I am more excited for than I have been in many, many years.
Yeah.
And you can start that off by saying, hey, it's because we are going to have a high flyer offense with an offensive minded head coach now. That instantly makes wide receivers, I think.
Well, wide receiver 3 has never really mattered in this offense because the Vikings have always led the league in 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver sets. And McVay and Zach Taylor and everyone in that coaching tree, they love running 3 wide receivers. It's their bread and butter. It's their base set. So KJ Osborne, you better win that job because someone else will come up and take it, and it's a lot of snaps that you're on the field with whenever you get to be wide receiver 3 in this offense.
Yeah, and having said that, with a run-first offense last year, he had 50 catches, 655 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I'm not going to sit here and expect 3 wide receivers to go for over 1,000 yards because you might all look at me and say I'm a little bit crazy. But the ceiling, or what was I trying to say? Again, we're rusty. Bear with us a little bit here. But I really think that there is a lot of promise. And I'd say it doesn't stop at wide receiver 3. It doesn't stop with the depth. And we haven't been able to say that in forever. I mean, BC Johnson as a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, I don't know if he makes the team or not. But BC Johnson as your last wide receiver on the team, that's nasty. I have a lot of hope for Amir Smith-Marset. We have Paul Allen, the radio home of the Vikings, saying, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if rookie Jalen Naylor snags the wide receiver 3 spot. I mean, there's so much depth and so much excitement at the position, and we haven't had that in so many years. I think Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell have to be drooling at the weapons they have at their disposal this season, and if they can use them properly, I have no reason to believe this isn't going to be a top 3 offense in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I think that the crucial thing about it is its simplicity to me, watching it and being like, oh yeah, how simple. Put Cooper Kupp / Justin Jefferson on a slant across the field and just have him run really fast away from somebody, and you can get him an easy 7-8 yards right there. Like those are some of the simple concepts. We just have to hope that O'Connell's play calling, one, is going to translate, because that is something that doesn't necessarily always happen, and we have to hope that he is implementing the offense in a very similar way to what we've seen Zach Taylor implement in Cincinnati.
Not trying to interrupt, but I want to get this off my chest before we move on. I don't know if it's physically possible for play calling to regress from what we saw last year. I think it has to. At the end of the day, I think the play calling has to get better. But I'm with you, and I understand what you're saying, and it's a different world that he's going to be living in. I know with the Rams, he was more of the play designer. Yeah. Now he's going to have a little bit of that while he's calling the plays, and it's going to be interesting. But it's a big if, because there's a lot that can go into a rookie head coaching season. But if the stars align, this is going to be a very special offense. And like I said, I have no problem saying that this offense has the firepower to be a top 3 offense across the league.
Absolutely. I just have to say this because I have to throw this out there, because it's like one of my hot takes that I'm excited to say this season. I think the Vikings offense, there's no reason it shouldn't be a top 5 unit. I think the Miami Dolphins should be a top 5 offensive unit this year too, with McDaniels going down there. Is that his name? It's Mike McDaniel, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Like the real young guy, definitely smokes a ton of weed. Like Mike McDaniel going down there, Tyreek Hill. God, that offense is going to be fun. But we could talk about that after the show, maybe at a fantasy football draft, whatever it is. But yeah, I do want to spend a little bit of time, because there is another side of the ball to kind of address here. And I have kind of mentioned, I think we mentioned in the post-draft episode, the defensive backs. Not only, and this is, I kind of was thinking, I think before every show, and I'm like, what am I going to say? And I was immediately thinking tonight, I was like, it's a rite of passage for Vikings rookies that I forget every one of their names until they make some sort of an impression on me. And the worst case scenario is we get a guy like Garrett Bradbury, whose name I have to I own his jersey, and I still forget his name on a weekly basis, and he's been the starting center for my favorite football team for 4 years now. But I think that what the Vikings did with their secondary in the draft is really, a lot hinges on that. The difference between being a really good offense that's in a lot of shootouts and makes the playoffs and then runs into a really good defense and hits the wall, and being an elite team that can score 17 points and still win a game. I think having the Mike Zimmer 17-10 game in your bag of tricks is a must-have for any Super Bowl contender. Whether you can score 56 on any given day, there's going to be days where you can't. Look at the Rams against the Patriots. The Rams, the offense didn't work in that Super Bowl against New England, and New England was able to kind of win this grind-out trench battle, and I want to see the Vikings be able to do that. And to do that, you have to be good on your side of on your defensive side of the ball as well. Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth Jr., who I think was the steal of the draft. I think he's going to come in soon and play really well. As well as what's his name? He's all over Twitter right now. He posts on Twitter.
Caleb Evans.
Yes, Caleb Evans. I'm just excited for the youth that we have in the cornerback room. And that's not even Lewis Cine being in the safety. So the defensive backs room, I'll say, not to mention Harrison Smith and Patrick Peterson are also back there causing chaos. What are you? I'm not going to say excited for, because I'm done being excited about the defense. What scares you the most about this defense? And then kind of what gives you hope about that thing, if you will. I'm scared of our youth, but our youth gives me hope because they might be good.
I think that's fair to say. I think the biggest thing is just depth. I think that's always the case. The Mike Zimmer teams that have historically been good, winning, playoff caliber football teams have been rather healthy throughout the year. I We saw that over the last couple seasons when I think it was 2020 they rolled out a secondary that it looked like it was you and me playing against the Green Bay Packers and they looked like they were completely lost out there. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is going to be a lot more of a well-rounded football team. I know Kevin O'Connell comes in and he's looked at it as this strictly offensive persona, but he's a head coach and I think he's made that very clear in some of his press conferences that he can wander over and talk to the defensive guys too. He's not going to sit there and stand like this when Kirk Cousins throws a touchdown pass in practice against his defense. I don't think he's going to act like that. I think he's going to be a lot more positive. And we heard Eric Kendricks and some of the leaders on this team preach for that and say, hey, we need that change to happen. And I think the biggest thing in I say injuries scare me. And then to flip the script, I'm going to talk about two guys that are rather injury prone. I was actually talking a Packers fan, and outside of last year, I guess Zadarius Smith really hasn't had the injury history. He's actually been a consistent player outside of the one season last year. Can't really say that about Danielle Hunter yet because he's missed the last 2 seasons, but again, this is another big if, and I think this is a big if, and kind of this could determine the direction of the 2022 season. If Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter play in 14 plus games, this defense is going to look light years different than what it looked like under Mike Zimmer last year. The pressure alone that just those two are going to be able to generate, and it's not just pressure from the outside. Both of those guys can line up right over the A gap. They can line up wherever the mismatch is, and I think Ed Donatell is going to really utilize that, and he's going to have people flying around. What you said about the offense is the exact opposite of what this defense is going to be. It's going to be confusing as hell. That is going to be their goal. They're not going to want you to be able to get reads off. And if they can do that properly with Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter, those are 2 top 10, top 15 pass rushers in this league when healthy. And you're not going to be able to block both of them. You can't double team both of those guys. One of them is going to have one-on-ones, and you do not want that against either of those guys. So I think that's going to help all 3 phases of the defense. You still have a absolute superstar running the middle with Eric Kendricks. And then I think what I like about, and what you were saying too about the youth movement, they have this youth movement, but they have 2 of the best players in the league over the last decade at their respected positions with Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith. And we saw with Terrence Newman how critical it is to not have a guy that's screaming in your ear from the sideline, but to have a guy up in your face that can coach you on the field as well. And I think we're going to get a little bit more of that. I don't necessarily know if Harrison Smith has jumped up and raised his hand for that role, but I think it's a role that he's going to kind of have to take. And I mean, Lewis Seen right away, it was all of his interviews talking about how he's going to stick right next to Harrison Smith's hip. I love that. I think those two, and by the way, Patrick Peterson, he was our best cornerback last year, I think. I don't think there's anyone like even in that tier. I think Cameron Dancer is a little bit hungry as well with the Andrew Booth selection. It's going to create some fun competition. Yeah. And just I'm excited for the defense as well. I'm not going to sit here and say I have top 5 expectations like I did for the offense. But if there's a top 5 offense and this defense kind of somewhere right in the middle, 15, 16, it will be a playoff team. I don't know how far this team will go in the playoffs year 1, but if both, and we can write that down. That can be my bold prediction of the day. But if we have a top 15 defense, I guess I don't know how bold that is, but top 15 defense and a top 5 offense, this is a playoff team. And I think that's why Vikings fans should be the most excited for this year. I'm not going to sit here and preach Super Bowl or bust because that's not the case anymore. The pressure's off the shoulders. Yeah. It's not a grumpy head coach coming in the building saying, you know what, if we don't win the Super Bowl this year, I'm done. That's not the case. They can go 0-17, and then you know what happens? Kirk Cousins probably won't be a Viking next year, and they hit the reset button a little bit harder than they did. So I'm excited. I think Vikings fans have a right to be excited. I think it's also fair to say, hey, let's pump the brakes just a touch, Colin Cowherd. But at the end of the day, I think we were both really big fans of both the hires they made at the GM position and the head coaching position. And I've been a fan of the coaching staff they put around and the pieces that they've brought in so far through the draft and free agency. So it's starting to feel different. It's still going to be kind of weird. I mean, just seeing training camp, how things are run, things are going to be different, and you're going to kind of have to get used to Kevin O'Connell the way we got used to Mike Zimmer over the last 7 years. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think both those hires were outstanding hires, and really the only thing we can do at this point is watch on Sundays and see the outcomes of these games.
Yeah, I feel a little bit guilty. I'm still sort of like, God, I wish we would have got D'Amico Ryans. but that was just because I was infatuated with him after we beat Green Bay in the playoffs last year. That's of course San Francisco's defensive coordinator.
I also want to point out that I'm assuming we're getting close to wrapping up. We just went through an entire show talking about what we're excited for and talking about how electric we expect this offense to be. And we didn't mention that the Vikings have a top 5 running back at their disposal either. So if that's not exciting as a Vikings fan, I don't know what is exciting.
Casually pass over. Not to mention our special teams or town man. We're going to have some exciting special teams.
I know this was reported. I don't know if we have talked about this yet or not, but another thing, just again, talking about an easy offense and getting the ball in your playmakers' hands. Delvin Cook throughout minicamp was catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. And that, I mean, what are you going to defend? You're going to have to pick your poison. At the end of the day, there's so many weapons. I think it's going to be a fun year. I don't know if it's going to be a winning year, but it's going to be a damn fun year. I can promise you that.
Do you have, and this is, I'm going to try and wrap myself up so that way I can pass it off to you really quickly. Do you have like any policy on drafting Vikings for a fantasy team? Because I try to stay away because it makes it double as bad if something, if they don't perform well, if the Vikings lose, if I take Justin Jefferson and he has a bad game and we lose, then I've had a terrible Sunday and not just a bad Vikings game. Do you have any policy on that?
I don't. I get what you're saying, but if there was ever a year to draft Minnesota Vikings players, I think this is the year. I think Dalvin Cook is very safe. I think Jefferson is safe. I know he's going to be a first-round pick, but I don't know if you're into best ball drafts at all. I've done one so far this year, so I haven't actually done this. But if I continue to do more, a stack that I really like is drafting the Vikings. I have a buddy that does a lot more fantasy research than I do, and he is convinced. He keeps telling me that Kirk Cousins for MVP. That is what he's saying. And he listens to hundreds of podcasts, and apparently the fantasy world is seeing the Kevin O'Connell take over in Minnesota and saying, hey, Kirk Cousins is going to have a year, and you know what that means? It's allegedly kind of what I was saying earlier. It's going to be big numbers for Justin Jefferson, but another player that I will say right now that especially where he's being taken, draft KJ Osborne. I will try to draft KJ Osborne in this draft because of what I said earlier. Adam Thielen is not a spring chicken anymore, and if he does get hurt, I think it's fair to assume he might miss a game or two here or there. KJ jumps into wide receiver 2 immediately in what we're saying could be the most high-powered offense in the NFL. That's got to be an exciting aspect to fantasy as well, where you can get a guy that late and say, hey, he can give you 20 points any given Sunday, depending on the situations, obviously.
Absolutely. That was where I was going with it, was like, it just seems like this is a year to draft some Vikings offensive players. Kirk Cousins is lining up under center for me next season. There's a 0% chance he's not. It's going to be Cousins or Lamar Jackson, one of those two guys, big years ahead. And I got a title to defend this year in my big money league. And so I would like to make that investment go a long way, the same way I did this past year. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up with this, and then I'm going to pass it off to you to kind of give us the catchphrase and the peace out. You said something, and I wanted to cut in, and I wanted to let you finish, so I didn't cut in. But you said something about how this team, the pressure's off. We can go 0-17. We don't have to win the Super Bowl this year. Damn it, that's the best time to win the Super Bowl. That's how
Agreed.
dynasties are made. It's Super Bowl or bust this year for me. If we don't win it, I will call for Kevin O'Connell's head, and we'll bring in D'Amico Ryans. We'll do it all over again, so we can all get excited all over again. But on a serious note, I think we're both very excited to see what happens. We keep saying, like, these are great hires, and I agree with you. I do think these are very good hires. I don't think we can really tell until, like, 5 years from now. Like, I would still consider Mike Zimmer
Yes.
a good hire for the Vikings. He's
Agreed.
one of the longest tenured coaches that we've had, and he won a few playoff games, took us to a championship game. Like, come on. I know we had some bad end of the years, but the end of every relationship is bad. Think of the happy times. There will be. We make fun of Mike Zimmer on this show because he's kind of an easy target right now. Very appreciative of what Mike Zimmer did for the team. Very excited to see this new era of Minnesota Vikings football. And finally, have to shout out the sponsor, Unified Athletic Wear. Head on over to unifiedathleticwear.com for all of your sports. Every time I say this, I want to say memorabilia. All of your sports uniform needs, whether that be football for any like school or local, football events, whether that be softball uniforms, whether that be wrestling singlets, soccer. Are they called kits? I think soccer kits. Is that they're called something weird.
Don't ask me soccer
I know,
questions
I know.
because you're going to make me look dumb.
I got into FIFA once and never again. But your soccer uniforms, anything you need, Unified's got them. They just released sunglasses, which are like pretty presto. I didn't get a pair, and they like immediately sold out. So you can follow them on Facebook at Unified Athletic Wear. Their logo is not purple and yellow. It is like baby blue and black. White, kind of general secondary colors. But because they're sponsoring a Viking show, I asked if we could kind of manipulate the logo, and the guy said A-OK. So you can also reach out to Titus Collins on Facebook for, again, anything you want to buy. But on that note, we've shouted out the sponsor. Follow the show at LTB Vikings. Follow this man at Jack_H_day. Jack, it's officially happened. We did about a half-hour show. I'm amped. I can't wait for that first preseason game. I can't wait for I'm getting there. I'm about to go fire up Madden 22 and start playing some games and get back into the swing of things. I'm going to pass it off to you. I think we'll be back next week with training camp happening, and we'll start talking about competitions and who's in danger of getting cut and all the fun training camp stuff. But for this week, Jordan signing off. Jack, floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't have anything super crazy. I feel like like I said, we were talking before the show a little bit. It hasn't felt as exciting hopping into these shows because it's like, hey, football is still so far away. Now football is here. It's damn near here already. And I think there's a lot to be excited for. We somehow just made it through an entire episode. I made the joke about Dalvin Cook. We somehow, Minnesota Vikings podcast, made it through a full 30 minutes until this point about talking about the backup quarterback position as well. That is, I think we both deserve a small round of applause for that. But I think that's another thing that we'll probably get into a little bit more next week when we start kind of breaking down some of these position battles. Because I know it's a backup position, but Vikings fans want to know about that. And I think both Jordan and I are lean one way more than the other on who we want to be the backup quarterback to be. But again, that can be a little teaser for next week. Outside of that, if you're watching the show, we're guessing you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, so just get excited. It's that time of year. I mean, hell, I think I saw it's 50. This could be completely wrong, and I'm not going to even attempt to do math in my head, but I thought I saw that the first regular season NFL game was 50 days away at some point this week. I don't know if it was today or yesterday. That's exciting. That means college football is like 40 days away, so football is right around the corner.
It's like 7 weeks.
Okay. So that's 7 times 7, 49. That's
Yep.
Look at that. I did math on the air and I got it right. So we're getting closer to that time of year where we can get overly excited about things that we probably shouldn't be and lose a bunch of money about betting, but we can talk more about that down the road. I'll leave you with this for now. Most importantly, Skol as always.